Say what?
Yeah, that's United Way, but.
Yeah, CCC, Combined Community Before I start the next session, I just want to ask those of you that I didn't get already, leave your yellow badges here for me. Or you can take the yellow part, but leave the clear plastic holders. Okay. We run out of that. Okay, one of the things that we want to do while you're down here is to give you the interchange with the division executives and let you see how successful people dress, operate,
I'm trying to say there's a development needs in that area.
In this particular module, what we want to do is to let you know how to make your careers even more successful than they have been. And the best way we know how to do that is to bring you a successful person who will tell you all his secrets and all his knowledge on the subject so that you can become as successful as him. And I'd like to present to you right now our Division Director of Personnel, Mr. Charlie Hawkins. Charlie?
I did not write Steve's introduction. Al told me this was going to be recorded for posterity or whatever purpose. And that usually bothers me about 3 minutes. Then I forget about it. But I also like to start out with a story I enjoy hearing me tell. It has nothing to do with the talk, getting me warmed up. I'm trying to decide what kind of story you might deserve. And I believe it. I will tell you the mule story because I don't believe anybody in here has heard it. Maybe. Mule story. This is a story about two farmers in Tennessee, which I'm well qualified to tell. One observing the mule of the other. He said, I really think that's a great mule. He said, you can have that mule for $150. He said, I'll take it. He gave him the $150. He said, but I can't pick him up today. I've got to go to town. Can I pick him up in the morning? He said, that'll be fine. He takes off, comes back in the next morning, and he says, I've come after the mule. And the second farmer says, I've got bad news for you. Right after you left, that mule died. Furthermore, I felt so bad about that, I went downtown and drank up the $150. He said, that's all right. Just give me the mule, I'll take it. He said, you don't understand. That mule died. Nobody wants a dead mule. He said, no, you don't understand. I'm perfectly happy. Give me the mule. So he loads the mule on the wagon and he takes off. Sees him 2 weeks later and says, how's your, I can't stand it any longer. What did you do with that dead mule? He said, I took him downtown, raffled him off a $1 ticket and sold 1,000 tickets. Everything went great. He said, weren't they mad when they found out that mule was dead? He said, only one. And I gave him his $1 back. Now, if you're trying to figure out if that has anything to do with management, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But I'm going to talk to you about management today. You've had enough maybe sessions on personnel. I'm going to talk about management the way I see it and the way I believe it tends to work. And I'm drawing you a set of charts here that shows that there are really 3 levels of management in our company and in others. There's executive management, there's middle management, and there's first line management. And of course, middle management includes many levels of management. So we have 2 that are easy to define and a group that is hard to define. And middle managers are called middle managers because they're the ones that are always in the middle. Right? Difficult spot to define. I've also drawn this chart in the form of what's known as, in the textbook, says the universal organization chart. You ever heard that term? That's a theory that says you should visualize the hierarchies of management as interlocking gears with big wheels at the top and little wheels at the bottom. Designed so that when the big wheel at the top turns 1/32 of a degree, the little wheel at the bottom is spinning 90 miles an hour. We also work in management in what I call percolate and trickle mode. Percolate and trickle, which I'll define. But before that, you need to understand that there's 5 stages of staff work that go on in an organization. And they go on all the time. And the 5 stages are suspicion, confirmation, quantification, an action program, and a tracking system, a follow-up system. That's a little fast. Let me hit that again. 5 stages of staff work. There's suspicion that there's a great opportunity or a horrible problem. There is confirmation that you're right or wrong. And to confirm it, you read reports that you have, you talk to people that you know, you got to look at it, kick the tires, and so forth. There's quantification. Are we talking about 1 spare part for a submarine system, or are we talking about 5,000? And we act differently depending on the answer, right? Those of you in Manassas know that. The 4th one is an action program to either take advantage of the opportunity or fix the problem. That might be 2 steps, or it might be 150 things that we want to do. And then finally, a way to track it to see if it's right or wrong, so we can tweak it, modify it, kill it, or start over. That's what goes on in a big company. And we have employees and managers also who spend their entire career in a company and don't know what phase they're working in, what stage they're working on a particular issue. But you can see the value of knowing whether you're in the suspicion phase or the tracking phase, right? To take the 2 extremes. And your way of operating and what you come up with might be significantly different. Percolate and trickle. Somebody up here gets a suspicion. They don't go solve it. What they do is let it trickle down the organization until you get somebody that does work, right? Now you've got 3 people working on 3 pieces of this puzzle independently of each other, maybe in different organizations. What happens? They complete their part of that, and they percolate the answers back up through their hierarchy of management, right? Some people say, you do a piece of work here as a worker, you take it to the first line manager, the first line manager thinks it's great, therefore they gather up the charts and go up here and take credit for it. And what happens to the first line manager? The second line manager does unto them what was done unto them, right? They take the piece of charts up to the third line manager. Well, that happens a lot. But one of the reasons it happens is because at every level of management, going up or going down, you're supposed to add what to a process? Add what?
Value.
Value, right? And if you don't add value, if you take something announced at corporate headquarters, for instance, and just copy it and send it out to the divisions, and then copy it and send it out to the sites, then copy it and send it out to the departments, that's called transparent management. Just as transparent as if this manager says, I know that's a problem and the problem is here, right? That's another form of transparency. They let me down. Instead of accepting it and saying, yes, I have a management problem myself. That's non-transparent. So what happens is that these 3 people complete their projects, they percolate it back up, and the executive that decided what the problem was in the first place listens to these 3 solutions, not necessarily at the same time. And they hear it, they make a decision, it's all over, right? Wrong. What that causes is 5 more questions, which trickles down the organization. Now you got 5 people working on 5 pieces of the problem, or 5 groups of people. That percolates back up, and that causes 10 more questions. So it goes up, down, finally, it's decided we have enough data, enough information, enough insight to make a decision, or to decide not to make a decision. You always have that option. And an executive role here, one of the main things that an executive has to decide is when to make that decision and when to leave all the options open. Right? Because once you make a decision, you've cut off the options. You've made a decision and it goes. So you play the game of what you should be doing. Are you ready to make the decision? Can you afford to wait? And do you want to be decided that you're indecisive, which is the pressure to get something done? On the other hand, you want it to be thorough, and the higher up you are, the more careful you have to be to make sure you're right. If the chairman of the board or the president of the company makes a decision and something, it is extremely difficult to go back and undo it, isn't it? If you and your department make a decision and decide tomorrow that you would like to change your mind, you call your 10 people together and say, I have changed my mind, and it's probably all done, right? But if you've got 350,000 employees, that's not so easy. So you can see I've already talked about the skill difference in here and here, right? You ought to, I'm going to do something a little different in this class because I just decided it might fit right here. I'm going to draw a flow chart for you on how you go from grade school to executive in a company like ours. It's a presentation I developed to explain to my son, who's an IBM sales rep in Tampa, Florida. He came to me, and after he'd been with the company 2 years, and said, I want to know how to get on executive resources. I was impressed because I didn't even know there was such a thing until I've been around 15 years. I said, I'll tell you how, and I'll make it up. We'll talk about going from grade school to executive. And whether you like it or not, you might fight with each other. Okay? First thing that you should do is you have to worry about grade school. And what are you supposed to learn in grade school?
All the basics, reading, writing.
You said the words, it's reading, writing, and arithmetic, the basics. Now, we're talking about young children here. Some don't understand the effect of not learning that down here. I'd say some, nearly all, right? Because nobody tells them. So let me give you an example. Let's take Vince Cook or Ken Greason, right? How much mail do you think they read a day? Have to read a day. Is it a large amount or a small amount? I get about this much a day myself. How long do you want to spend on reading that mail per day? What would be your objective?
Small amount, little.
How long?
Possible. Well,
How long would you say it takes?
Less than 30 minutes. Half hour.
I'd say about an hour. But you could spend, if you're not a good reader, and that's not only reading just to get through it, it's reading with comprehension and then deciding what to do with it so that you're not holding it up. And then also not having to do any more work, which is one of your major objectives. You don't want to spend any more than an hour a day reading a stack of mail this deep. And if you didn't learn that back here, what you need to know here, how can you do that? You could spend all day long reading Vince Cook's mail and still not know what to do with it if you can't do this. Now, the way I see that come out in our employees that complain about their careers, many of them that I get to, is they're down in here somewhere and they say, I think I should go out and get an MBA or a financial degree or something else. Why? Say, well, Bob Turner went off to school and got this thing and he got promoted. He's a first-line manager. Therefore, that must be what caused it. That's not what caused it. So they go off to school and they invest tuition refund and they get something else and come back and nothing happens. Why doesn't anything happen? Maybe they're no better than they were before they took the course, right? Maybe while they were taking the course, somebody else played harder because it's a competitive ballgame. So that may or may not. But I found many times from the complainers who are worried about that is the problem started back here, and therefore it's very hard to fix it. So the basics you got to have. The next thing that happens to a person is they go to either to junior high and high school. They're now old and experienced and know everything. And they have pressures to make grades. They have pressures to participate in extracurricular activities like football, basketball, the glee club, and so forth, orchestra. A lot of pressures to spread their attention. They have a social environment where your major objective when you're a teenager is what? You took 50 kids out of any high school, what would be their major objective? To be what? Accepted, popular. Peer pressure is severe, isn't it? And number two is so far down they haven't even thought of it yet. So the social pressures here are very hard. And they have a selection process, even in high school. They can take advanced math or home economics. They are allowed at age 14 to make those decisions by most parents and most teachers. And then finally at the end of this, they have to make a decision on whether they're going to go to work, join the armed forces, or go on further to more school. Let's suppose they go on to college. What's the first thing Zach asked of a new college student, freshman, age 18, is what? What are you going to major in? What's the question back from the student? What is a major? Right? I had a person in a key manager's seminar the other day that said that sounds so unreal to them because their parents decided that they were going to be an engineer back when they were 10 years old. I said, that may seem unreal to you, but I would say 1/10 of 1% of the parents do that. Right? So, what are you going to major in? The next thing is they worry about grade point average. Do you think that college students worry about what kind of grades they're making? I made a speech to a group of MBA students in Vanderbilt last Friday. And at the end of it, I told them what I would do if I were them. I said, I would make good grades because that has something to do with getting in the door. On the other hand, I would also listen to what's presented in class and sit around with my peers and discuss the significance of that and what it really means so that I understand the concepts in depth. Well, the same reason you want to understand these concepts in depth. You can make good grades in college and not understand the concepts, can't you? But when we hire those people, we want them to understand the concepts. And the grades become insignificant once they get in the door. They're not insignificant to get in the door. But if you were to take the list of executives that I know in this building and say to John Jackson or anybody else, where did they go to school and what they major in, you know what he would say? Plead ignorance and apathy, right? He'd say, I don't know and I don't care. Right? Because now it's not significant, is it? You've got 15, 20 years track record to look at. But at this point in time, that's pretty significant. If you have extracurricular pools here, do you have any here? How about social pools? You're not broke when you got there. You will be soon. And you have fraternities and sororities to worry about, and zillions of other things. Grade point average is significant in one respect, and one respect only. It tells a prospective buyer down here that this individual can compete in this environment. Some can compete only in this environment. What they do is persuade college professors, many of them, and that's all right. Except they can't draw this flow chart I'm drawing for you because they don't know the rest of what I'm going to draw. Really, they don't know. Well, they've never been there. They can talk about the theory at great length, and we need that. All right, now what happens is you go to work, and you go out and you go through usually a training program. It's either 2 days or 2 minutes or 2 years long, somewhere in there. Depends on what it is and how quickly what you took up here can be applied. Now, engineers get a very short training program. Why? It's because what they're trained in is immediately usable. A liberal arts major who goes to work for accounting has a different problem, don't we? We don't have a job description that says liberal arts, as far as I know. So we go through a training program. And here we are trying to determine if this individual can adjust from academia to the workplace. The next thing we do is we give them an entry-level job. I say entry-level for a reason. A lot of people going through college think that they're being trained to be executives because that's what they hear, right? How to read a financial report, how to run a big corporation. We don't hire very many people who are 24 years old out of MBA schools to be vice presidents. What I told the MBA students the other day is that our intent is to give them the basics of the business and then let them manage it, as opposed to what they believe is true, is let them manage it without knowing the basics of the business, which has fatality attached to it. And that's the major reason, by the way, that many MBAs go out and do a job for 2 years and leave. Just picking across the top. Entry-level job, and here we're trying to see if you can apply what you learned. The next thing I want to draw is a box that did not exist years ago because it wasn't a problem, but it is now. And that's called staying power. Can you last? It didn't used to be a problem, but now people grow up in a television environment, don't they? Where if they don't like Channel 2, what do? They used to watch the Redskins, but that doesn't last long. So the Redskins have a lousy year. And so they go to Channel 7, watch Charlie's Angels, which is better if you turn the sound off. You agree with that, don't you? I told my son that staying power is the difference, he's a sales type in DP. I told him the difference in that the definition of staying power is, can you install what you sold? You're talking about engineering and programming, is it will what you wrote or designed run, right? Can you last? But if you took a lot of people who are used to a span of attention of 2 or 3 months, like if I don't like my summer job, that's all right, I'll stand it for 3 months, I'm going back to school in the fall. I don't like my math teacher, that's all right, I'll get a different one next time. You can stand that if it's only 3 or 4 months, right? I don't like my girlfriend or boyfriend, what do? Get rid of them, find another one. Some even get rid of their parents today. But short span of attention. If you want a career that goes from grade school to executive, though, you've got to have staying power that goes 25, 30 years, right? And one that doesn't go picking through this way, but hones in on a specific set of objectives so that you can become in depth on something. Now the next thing that happens is they do well in that, and this happens to be a high potential person. What we tend to do with them is give them a staff job of some kind. Is it significant to learn how to do staff work? Some people say, I hate staff work. Here they have to do things, they have to run programs instead of doing everything themselves. And they have to learn how to influence a lot, they have to multiply themselves, or they can't do everything themselves. The significance of staff work, if you're worried about a long-range career, is take a look at this building. How many line executives are there in this building? You know? What do you think? Line executives, 3. Who are they?
Jackson recently. Cook.
And Babbitt is the other one because he happens to be housing. All the rest are what? Staff. So the majority of the high-level positions in this division, as well as others, and in the whole company, are staff jobs, right? And if you don't learn how to do staff work, how can you manage a significantly sized staff, right? Very few go straight up the line organization without ever having a staff job. And those that do wish they hadn't. Because running a staff is harder than running a line organization. Because the measurements are flaky. And it's harder to tell when you're through. Some would say it's even more political. Because you don't know all this. Once you go through that, we would tend to make a person a first-line manager. Now what do they have to learn that they've never had before? Management of what? People. And we're trying to see, can this person take what they know and can they translate it to their department of 10 or 12, 15 people in such a way that motivates them, produces, and grows this manager to where they can take on more. And a big piece of that is delegation. John Jackson put out an article that human resource management has to be the determining factor of how you're appraised, right? And somebody asked me the other day, he said, what he said in effect was, you cannot be appraised higher than your human resource management appraisal, right? Somebody asked me in a class not long ago, what do you think he meant by that? I said, I think what he meant was you cannot be appraised higher than your human resource management. Because I was there when he wrote it. So that's exactly what he meant. What we're trying to do here is, can you manage through people? The next thing that happens is we might give you a higher level staff job. Either it's a professional or a non-management job or a management job. And here the difference in this one and this one is it's more creative. And the peers you have to work with are very sophisticated. It's the person who decides that we ought to put more effort on the ADP line and less on something else. The trade-off thing. In the personnel shop, most of these people are located in corporate, although I have a few. They determine whether we should have an increase in the dental plan or whether we should have an increase in the retirement plan. There's X amount to spend, right? They determine not only what it is, but how to do it. And so it's very creative. How does that? The next thing we would tend to do with this person who's continuing to exceed and compete and go well is make a middle manager. And here they are managing managers instead of employees, and they're spending their time on what's called POCD, planning, organizing, controlling, and delegating. And they're coaching managers, not non-managers. And they usually have a big function to manage, of 50 or 60 people or bigger, as opposed to 10 or 12. So the scope of it is larger. Therefore, the person who has to do everything themselves will not make it to this level. They can't do it. They can, but it doesn't work too well. And then finally down here you have executives. And executives are different from all the others because they have to do everything through others. They have to work in time slices. In fact, they have to do it themselves. We're overpaying them. Have to work in time slices of 20 to 30 minutes, changing subjects that often all day long, or they don't get through their agenda. And they have to have cue sensing, a tremendous amount of it. What's cue sensing, Kate?
It's being able to pick out the key elements within picking up the cues from others.
Others and around you, right? That's pretty good answer. The way I would define it is it's knowing from the environment you're in and everything that you know about it, when to do what, with whom, and how, and when to quit. In the sales game, we call it trial closes. You ever heard the term trial closes? If I were selling Tom something, and I wanted to make sure I pushed it as far as possible without getting him irritated, I would do a trial close. Let's say I'm trying to sell him a personal computer, right? So Tom, you've been thinking about that personal computer that we advertised the other day? Tom says, yes, I've been reading through the literature. I said, have you decided how you want to pay for it? Yes, I'm thinking about it on payroll deduction. Tom, if you thought where you might put it, yes, I'm going to clean out my wife and now the bedroom and we put it in there. I said, all right, have you thought about how you're going to learn how to program it? Yes, I have gotten a manual and I've started to read it. Is he ready to order? Would you push for a close? But if he says, hey, I haven't thought about that, or I've found hurdles of where I'm going to put it in my house, I have to buy another house in order to have room to put it, you might ease up, right? Well, that's an example of cue sensing. And that is why many of our executives in the IBM company came up through marketing, because they spend their lives figuring out how to do that. They're not the only ones that can figure that out. As you can notice, there are a lot of executives that do not come up that way. But it's not the fact that you're in marketing, it's the skill, right? The skill to cue sense what's going on. Does that little chart create any questions with you?
Is marketing the only function that, might be a dumb question, but is marketing the only function that gives the opportunity that type of level manager?
No, it goes on every day. I'll give you an example here. I attend many meetings with John Jackson, staffs, and so forth, and many presentations. And there'll be a person up presenting. 50 charts, 5 up. Only time all year they'll see John Jackson going full tilt. And John will say, would you please conclude this in 5 minutes? Yes. And they go on 50 more minutes. They didn't read that cue. Right? Didn't realize that after 5 minutes nobody's listening. That's an example that goes on here. Some are very good at that, some are not. But marketing is not the only place. In fact, there are lots of places you can pick that up. I just say it's easier because that's the way you make your living. So there's several thresholds. There's get the basic education. Get it here. George Burns, by the way, has a 3rd grade education. That's all he has. Makes more money than any of us, right? And lives a lot longer. So by the time he knew what to do, he's too old to do it. There's the get more sophisticated education. There's the break in and get started part. There's can you last. There's can you understand staff work? Can you manage? Can you be creative in your management? Can you manage a large function? And can you have the sophistication to see the very broad picture and make executive decisions? Is this helpful to you? Now, Executive Resources is a program we have to try to pick out people, and I'd say from here on back, in this area, predict that they can go to here and determine what they need in their background to go there, so that we make sure we don't have too long of delays and they can't make it for time reasons. But within each of these boxes that I drew very simply here, there are careers that people get into and stay their whole career. Right? We have staff people that work for me that have been staff people for 15, 20 years and expect to be there another 20 years. That's all right. What I'm going is to picture to go all the way here. Okay? Back to this. You look at this chart and you know how it works, and you say, how do you distinguish this level of management from this level? And that's important because most of you want to go from here to here sooner or later. I'd say there are two things that you should strive for here that are difficult, should be strive for here, but are more difficult to attain. One is you should be comfortable in your job and not be up why and fix it. And the other one is you should do no work. And that's a tremendous motivator for most people. By do no work, I don't mean what that sounds like. I guess I mean do different work. Do things different here than you do here. You have to think also how people go from here to here. What they do is they work away and get really good at this job right here, or they don't compete at all. And we get a certain number of them that are operating right up here. More glad to talk to you about development. What I think you can do is that you can take your 10 people and say, let me tell you what managerial talents they're showing while they're in here. Right? Can't you do that? This person is not showing any managerial any talent, because all they do is go hide in their room and code. This person shows a little bit because they come forward with a suggestion every now and then. And this person over here likes to go after more and more responsibility, run task forces, and is willing to step up and take that challenge. So they have maybe potential. So that's the way these are moved up here. What happens then is we make a certain number of them first line managers. 1 out of 10, I'd say. We got to this point. The question is, how do they operate? Do they operate like this, or like this on the first day? Most of them operate right here. Because they understand this, they're trying to learn this, and how to follow that. Yeah. And what they do is they get better and better at this, and they start getting a little more sophisticated. And what should happen at some point in time, probably about 180 days in your job, you should say, the way I should really learn is not only to do all these things, but I'll observe above me what happens and pick pages out of their book. For example, if you were making a presentation to an executive and had not made a point of significance for 15 minutes or so, what would happen to you? You're out, somebody else is in, right? It's also more difficult to get back in the next time, isn't it? After having that reputation. How long do you last here before you're escorted out?
Less than
You take 15 minutes here, how long does it take you?
5.
Oh, I think 30 or 40. How long did it last here? Before you throw somebody out? I've seen it go for all day. Why is that? Two things that cause that. One is that the fact that the first line manager has a different group of people to manage than the second line manager. Harry Truman said what?
buck stops here.
Right, and in the management chain, here's where the buck stops, right? Now the second reason is experience. You have not yet learned how to package them up and get them out there. I had a case one time where this individual, I was here and I had a first line manager and an employee that was complaining to the first line manager all the time. Finally started writing them notes. What are you doing to help me on this subject? This same employee was in a meeting with me one time with about 6 or 7 other people on a different subject. And every time there was a lull in the conversation, the employee would say, bring up one of these problems that he hadn't solved yet. And I started taking notes on it. At the end of the meeting, I said, all the rest of you leave, I'd like you to stay. I said, you have been talking about problems you have been having. And I listed them, and I classified them and sorted them into 6 problems. He thought there were 60. I said, here's problem number 1, and here's what I want you to do about that, and get back to me in a week and tell me how it stands. Here's problem number 2, and here's what I want you to do about that, and get back to me in about 3 weeks and tell me where this is. I gave him 6 assignments. He didn't bother me with a problem ever again. And it was legitimate, because in my whole staff, he was the best one to answer those questions. Knew tons more about that than I did. And a lot more than that I wanted to know. So that's what I mean by experience, right? That discussion lasted 10 minutes. He had 6 assignments, came back 6 times, never complained again, to me. So, you move then on first-time managers, you get an X number that operate like this, and some are selected and pop across the line until they move up here, and the same process goes on here. You learn in all directions. You learn taking pictures of the people what you have. Now you talk about also the subject of coaching. If you were to look at the map data that you all participate in, right, MAP? If you look at that for the corporation over time and several forms, you find that these 3 subjects come up at the bottom out of 57 questions. And if I were to poll you and ask you, this is probably what you would say too, that of the things that I get from my manager, these are at the bottom. I don't get enough feedback in coaching, I don't get enough recognition, and I don't have enough career discussions. It's improved over time because this happens to be, especially this one, has turned out to be one of the main thrusts we've had in management development because of that. So this has gone from about 30% positive to about 60% positive in the last 3 or 4 years. But still at the bottom, these 3 counts. And on the subject of coaching, you have to think what that means. How do you coach from here to here, or from here to here, on a subject like management? Well, there's a way not to do it, and that is to go to a class like this or read a book on transactional analysis or something, and go back to your staff and say, I have learned a new theory, and that's what we're going to do here. What that assumes is that you understand the theory and can apply it. It assumes it's an appropriate theory for your type of operation. And further, it assumes that you will stick to that theory or you have a credibility problem, don't you? You can't float in and out of it. So how do you describe conceptually what you should do on coaching somebody on something like this? Well, the way I describe it is to make an analogy between management and Big Daddy Lipscomb. Some of you have never heard of Big Daddy Lipscomb, have you? Years ago when I used to speak to classes, everybody heard of Big Daddy Lipscomb. Big Daddy Lipscomb played tackle on the Baltimore coast. Why was he called Big Daddy? 6'7" and weighed 208 pounds. And he was particularly effective when provoked, which was almost every game. And one day he was coming off the field, and the TV announcer stopped him and said, Big Daddy, how do you make so many tackles? He said, what I do is I gather up an armful of the opposing team. I feel around in there till I find the one with the ball, and I keep him. Now that's a theory that can be applied here. What you're tempted to do when you become a manager is you say to yourself, comma, how did I get there? I got there by being a top-notch engineer. That's how I got here. Or a top-notch programmer, or a top-notch something else. Therefore, that's what's made my career, and that's what I will do up here. So what I will do is I will exploit what I know. I'll go in this way and do what I've been doing well, and later on I will expand to the other things a manager is expected to do. How's that work? What happens, in effect, is that you're doing this much of the job and leaving some things to later. Suppose you use that same philosophy when you become a second-line manager. How much are you filling into the job there? Or even maybe you're lucky and hit the orders just right and you become the executive. You see the point I'm trying to make? Well, the way you prevent that is to not do what you did here in the first bit, but to start with the broadest perspective you can of your job and determine what populations you must satisfy and what those populations think, including the people under you, to the side of you, and above you. And what is the mission that you're trying to accomplish, business mission you're trying to accomplish. Start broad, and then start defining what you're doing, bring it in like this, and pick the things that you must manage personally, and get control of those, define them how you're going to control them in some depth, and delegate the rest with a tracking system that allows you to know when there are problems on an exception basis. We could stop right now and my message is complete. Do you understand what I'm talking about? I use Jim Battani as an example sometimes. All of you know Jim Battani? He went to Poughkeepsie to be a vice president from here with a $2 billion chunk of the business under him. And I asked the class, how long do you think it takes for him to get rolling in his job? 5 weeks, 5 minutes, 5 years, 5 months, or what? What do you think the answer is?
Instantly, right?
He decided how to get rolling on his plane trip to take over the job, didn't he? How can you do that? He didn't worry about designing circuits, did he? What did he worry about?
People.
So what am I there for? And how do I start, right? And since he had been through all of this, and 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 all of this, he knew how to do it, didn't he? Because the higher up you go, your role turns into not designing the circuits, or not doing the programming, or not doing that, but how to manage the process and watch others do that, right? And how to tell whether they're doing it right, and how to step in and how to step out. When to delegate, when to assume command. And that's the kind of thing that these people are very good at. Especially a guy like Jim Tyne, right? So what you do is you assume as much as you can and hone in and be selective on it. Now many people who are asked how they're coached here will say, I am doing unto these people what was done unto me, which was nothing, as far as coaching them in a management job is concerned. And you ask some people, does your manager do any coaching of you? Some people will say, no. There is no way that I can think of where you don't coach people under you. Because the difference in coaching and teaching is with demonstration. Right? If you were going to teach somebody how to play defensive guard on a football team that had never seen a football, you would take the thing and say it's egg-shaped so it will bounce crooked. Right? You start with the basics. And you would lay it on the field, and you'd have somebody snap the ball, and what would you do? You would demonstrate, wouldn't you, what you want them to do. That's phase one. You would demonstrate. You say, watch what I do when the ball snaps. And the significance of not moving too fast, too slow, or whatever. Because if you move too fast, you'll be what? When you move before the ball snaps, what happens? You're offside. 5 yards. What happens if you move too slow? You'll be in a prone position with cleat marks up your chest. And somebody who's weighed 250 pounds will be walking across you. So it's important to learn. The penalty for not learning is pretty severe, isn't it? So then what do you do after you give them the basics? What do you do next as a coach? You watch them try. Now do you go up into the stands and disappear, or what do you do?
Stay on the field, right?
And do what? And do what? Gotta give feedback, right? You're doing that well, but you're leaning to the left. You'll get knocked to the side this way if they come this way. You're too fast, you're too slow, you're telegraphing, or whatever it is, right? In a management job, the minimum coaching you can do is just by your own demonstration of what you do yourself, right? Whether or not you will always be a role model. The question is, will you be a good one or better? Somebody asked me once, is there no value to a manager who doesn't do a good management job? I said, yes, the only value I can think of is they are a good negative role model. And people will say, I don't want to be like that. But there's another thing that drives this home. I have a consultant friend who says you can never not communicate. Double negative, right? You can never not communicate. And if you demonstrate poor management here, that's the role model you're predicting. That's the role model you're presenting, as well as from here to here. Another thing I have learned is that first-line managers are extremely critical of second-line managers and go out and implement the thing the same way the managers are doing that they criticize. Because these three things pop up on, not on first-time managers to the same extent they do on second-time managers. There's also the case where you're here and it comes out this way, that here's what is really important in a management job. And the reason I know it's important is this is what my manager asked me about. What do you get asked about if you're in manufacturing by your manager? Where do you stand on what? Schedule. What if you're in finance? What do you get asked about? Cost, budgets, that kind of thing. What if you're in sales? Quota attainment, and so forth. Those things all have one thing in common. They're numbers, right? In my ballgame, it's how many of you hired. How many minorities and women have you hired? What's the morale index in the division, and so forth. Numbers. That's what you get asked about. Therefore, that must be what's important. And over here to the side is a little smaller thing that's called management. And we talk about this part in management school all the time. What's it called? Management of what? What we talk about all week? Management of what? Did we talk about management of logic design? How to manage the people, right? And when I ask the classes, do you want us to change and tell you more of the technical side of the division, or continue to run this class where it's mostly people management? Nearly everybody in the class says, this is what we need, not the other side. You'd agree with that, wouldn't you? Managing a machine is easier than managing the people, because the machine will tend to do the same thing all the time until it malfunctions. But people are completely unpredictable. So what you get the message from talking to a lot of managers is we work away on these kind of things because that's important, because that's what we ask about. And if we ever get the numbers in good shape, we drift over here and do a little people management, where we leave a strong path back in case the numbers get out of shape, as far as where you spend your time. That's one of the things that caused the Management News article that said this part over here is very important. What that tells you is that people perceive that those two things are two different things, right? Management of things, management of people. Then we further reinforce that by the question we asked in the opinion survey, which says, how does your manager do on the technical side of the business, and how do they do on the people side of the business? As if it looks like this. Does it look like this? How does it look? Looks like this, doesn't it? Is that the way it looks? Is it dangerous to have this appear to be separate from this? What's the outcome if this happens? If you really do it that way, what's the outcome of that? What do your people perceive about you as a manager?
Can't relate them to the job. Two things, you're either worried about them or you're worried about the job. Numbers of people.
Right? And if you have 10 people for you, and 9 of them think you're only worried about the numbers, what does that do to you?
Numbers management, right?
Are they waiting in the weeds to make you a hero or to make you well known for what you are? They're waiting for the right issue, aren't they? What we really want is for managers to operate by putting that little people thing in the middle, isn't it? And to produce the numbers how? By the way you manage the people. You might even get higher numbers. Right? That's the way I perceive that's the model of the way I perceive what we want out of managers. How do the Japanese do on this? Did they write 2 different things? Or do you know? They're very successful in doing what I say right here. They work very hard on consensus now. Competitively, they're driving us, the Americans, out of our minds too, aren't they? Now I'm going to describe 5 things that I think are real, 5 examples of things that distinguish those who do a real true management job and learn how to manage more and more and more, opposed to those who just hold the job. And the 5 things I'm going to talk about are these things right here as examples. I'm going to give you some tips on things that I have found to be important. The First up there is control. When I try to think about why more people, all of you shook your heads on why this is really the way we want it and not like that. My question many times is, why is it I can get agreement across the whole class and they go back and then operate like this, many of them? Why doesn't it last? Is the question. Because we spend more and more money every year on training managers, developing them. Why doesn't it get more practical application? Well, one of the answers I get back is I go to the school and I hear the theory, but I don't see it happening here. Another thing I hear occasionally is, don't tell me what you're telling me, tell my boss. They need it worse than I do. What I do is tell whoever's in the room. But that's one answer you get. Another answer you get is there's not enough time to do this. Let me tell you, there is not enough time to do this. That takes more time than that. You think it takes longer or shorter to do appraisals on time? Where do you have your longest discussions? When you do them on time or when you don't do them on time? You have one that you want to make a 3 or 4 and be 8 months late on it and see what happens. You've got one that's killed and you have to start over. So it's a matter of how you save time, not how you increase your time. And I think about sometimes why it is more don't go out and do something about moving this into here. And I come up with the answer that they're not in control. I have control over there, but the word is in control. Peter Drucker would tell you in his book on management, which is about this thick, and all of you ought to read it, that being in control is different from having controls. Which one of those two do you track the most numbers in? In control or having control? Take 2 managers. One who's in control, one who has controls. Which one's going to have the most numbers with? The problem is they will not be the right ones, or there'll be a lot of unnecessary ones, right? What they have failed to do is they have gone to here, but they haven't brought it to here, right? Has controls, in control. There's the same difference there is in an efficient manager and an effective manager. An efficient manager does things right. What's an effective manager do? Good. The right things. Those are 2 different things. So being in control is the key. And from a coaching point of view, if you want to coach others on how to be in control, what must you be able to do? That may be, but there's another significant thing you must be able to do, right? What did the coach who was telling the person to play football have to be able to do? They described it, didn't they? If they didn't know football was egg-shaped, that they had already. So you see, people management starts with an understanding that you know the technical subjects, right? If you took someone from the outside the company and say, I'm going to train you up to here with people management, but technology is not important, what are we going to have? A complete disaster, right? So I told the MBAs at Vanderbilt the other day, is we expect you to have all the techniques and the things that you're supposed to be taught. But the thing that will determine whether you go from grade school to executive or not is how you manage the people. So you have to start with the understanding to have a technical stuff. And that's true of coaching. You have to understand how to be in control in order to coach somebody on being in control, don't you? So you have to be able to describe it. Suppose you picked up the phone and you were the site manager in Owego, and you called 10 first-line managers with no notice and said to them, I would like to know what is your philosophy and concept of being in control. What would you hear back?
Long pause.
Long pause. What do people do who don't know the answer? Do they have long pauses? They chatter like that, don't they? And the more they talk, the less they know usually. That's what I call talking fast and loud. There are three kinds of answers if you're a middle manager. And you ask, if you're up in here and you ask anybody down below you a specific question, there are three kinds of answers you get. One is we're 12 gross and 3 net. That's right down the lead. You say, how many are there? It's 12. Just like that. That instills confidence in you, doesn't it? The second kind of answer you hear back, particularly in an IBM company, is I don't know, but I'll get back to you, right? And the third kind of answer you hear is they fake it. They talk fast and loud. And what you do as a middle manager is you package all those three answers up, add them up, make them crossfoot, and report upwards and talk fast and loud. Because you know what you've got. So if you get a call or you're in a meeting and you get pinned down on something and you find yourself chattering like mad, regroup. It's obvious you don't know, right? Just say, I don't know. It's better than faking. So being in control. Here's the way I have found that works for me best to be in control. I've done it several times. I go through specific phases when I take over a new job. Phase one is I get together a notebook about this size or a little bigger, 3 rings in it, and I put index pages in. Of those things I think I must be on top of at all times. So what are you doing when you do that? You're going from here to here as quickly as you can, huh? Trying to decide. Now 2 things happen after you do that. The first thing that happens is that you get asked by your boss a question that you don't have an index page on. And you say, whoops, I must be responsible for that also, and you add an index page. The second thing that happens comes from your predecessor, who says, if I were you, I would worry about this. What does that do to you? What does that tell you? What it really tells you is they're trying to get out of that before it becomes an issue, and they hope you go out and solve it, because there's an X amount of time when they can still be blamed. Right? And the alligators are swarming around your ankles on that one. So put that one in the front. Get on top of it. But some way you've got to get a technique that says, here are the things that I must know. And I can delegate the rest. This is the way I try to do it. It forces me into a discipline that makes me do that. The second phase is I look for status reports to reflect the status of each one of those items. How can you tell where it's going if you have no stake in the ground, right? Now you turn to someone that works for you and say, I want to know where, in my case, salary planning stands. So that here's a big report this thick. I said, I don't want that. I just want to know where it stands. I said, well, there is no status report. Get one. There's no place to get one. Make one up. So we can see if it's right or not, right? So get a status report on it some way. The next thing I worry about is the format of those status reports. Since I picked on salary planning, I don't want my salary manager to give me a machine run report that's that thick on what the 11,000 people in FSD make. That's one way to do it. That's not what I'm after. What I want to know is a one little simple report that looks like this. Now on this side is a WIGO and analysis and so forth. And in here is month, year-to-date performance. And underneath that is plan and attainment. And total. And if I'm supposed to spend $18 million on salary increases this year, I want to know if it's going to be 18, 17, or 52 million. This one will determine whether I can stay here or not. Right? And if the bottom line of this thing is going month and year to date, okay, I may not ask another question about that subject until the next monthly report, right? But if this is wrong, what's the next step? You want to know which one of these it is, don't you? Once I determine that, the question is, do I want to go blister them? Or what? Do I want to award this one and blister that one? See how quickly you can focus on it if you have the right report? Takes 3 minutes. I don't know whether to spend any more time on salary or not this month. But if they gave me that big machine on the report, it would take me a long time to figure out what it is. The format's important. Level 4. is I establish the frequency of the updates and who's responsible. For a first line manager, many of that's done by yourself. Because you won't post them. It turns out if you keep good controls, you rarely have to refer to them, right? Why? You know where it is. I know that I'm within 0.5% of the salary plan this year. If I thought about it then, I could even visualize how the report looks, and I only looked at it 5 minutes. Because the format is the same all the time, and I have a frequent update, brings it to my attention. The fifth thing is I look for action programs in that area. Because a department or a function within a department is like a person's brain. It's either going like this, or like this. And one of those is almost impossible, which is it? Can't hold anything stable in this business. And the issue of a manager who wants to do well is if it's going this way, find out before your boss does, and institute things that are going to start bringing it back up. Those are called action programs. If you got it going like this, and you don't know it because you don't know the status, or even if you do know it, you're not taking actions over a period of time, you will be called to task, right? Because we do measure by the numbers, and we do know when things go out of track. That's why we're scientifically managed. We put a number on almost everything. You can't go to your boss and say, we have produced some parts this month, so I did well. What's their next question? How many is some, right? It says 18. What's their next question? How many should you have done? If you don't know, you've got a problem, right? So what you do is you test your control approach. And what I do is I keep this book and I keep it updated, and I put in front of January, I put in the February report. In front of February, I put in the March, and so forth. I don't worry about how thick it gets. When it gets real thick, I start over.